Thank you, Jill, and thank you to those attending today. I hope you find this information helpful. We're going to talk a lot about social media today. It's my belief that we're basically whether you like it or not, social media is something we're going to be coexisting with for the future, and so it's important to discuss how we're going to deal with it, whether we like it or not. I mean, that's just a reality. So as always, we're going to be taking questions at the end. Make sure if there's any comments you have, anything we don't touch on, you keep that in mind. And if you want to follow up afterwards, my email is below. You can feel free to reach out there. So let's get started. All right, so to introduce things, we have different relationships with social media. There are people who sort of fanaticize social media, who are always on their phones. They are always tweeting, or maybe they're on LinkedIn posting content always. I know I post a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. And then there are other people who, I think about my dad, who he doesn't want to use these things at all. And he even doesn't want people posting his picture on Facebook. He's like, they don't need to know who I am. But the reality is that social media has an impact on our lives, whether we like it or not. It's just gotten too big. And so even if we say we're not going to use Facebook, we're not going to use Twitter, I'm not going to create a profile on LinkedIn, I'm happy just the way I am, we have to realize that there are forces outside of us that sort of impact us when it comes to social media. Data is really being exchanged on these platforms constantly, even if you didn't ask to be a part of it. I mean, think about things like again, getting back to an example, you might not be on social media, but your cousin is, or your sister is, or something like that, and they're posting things about you. Maybe they're sharing family anecdotes. Maybe they're showing an old family photo. Maybe your employer is on LinkedIn, and you don't use LinkedIn, but they're showing pictures of the company barbecue or the engagement that you had recently, or they're talking about things that their staff experienced, or maybe they're discussing, you're applying for a job, and two people are communicating on LinkedIn about you based on your job experience or something like that. They're using it as a networking tool, background information tool. So you're really involved, even if you don't want to be. Some businesses have a very casual relationship with social media, leading to potential fraud or threats to quote unquote brand. So I say this because if you go on LinkedIn or Facebook or any of these things and you look up your company, and let's say you really haven't done much with it, there's a decent enough chance that either there's some old page that someone put up 5 years ago that has out-of-date information with contacts and people and addresses that don't exist anymore, or maybe somebody else put up maliciously to either make you look bad or steal your image or steal your brand and exploit people who may be looking for you on Facebook. So it is important for us to know, what is our presence online, both in a realistic as well as a fraudulent perspective. Employees, customers, stakeholders can share too much. So this sort of gets back to the example above. It's probably not a good idea to share too much information on Facebook, but you can't help it if somebody else decides to share that information for you. So we have to really acknowledge that, understand what we want to do about it. So our agenda today is just to talk a basic review of the platforms and typical engagement on them. This is sort of something we don't want to get too much into because one thing that's true about social media is that it's changing and things are getting more or less popular all the time. Just think about where TikTok is today and just how in the past, maybe 2 years, how it's become so prominent. I want to talk about some common attacks and threats on social media. So, so far I've talked a lot about the sort of social fraud of it, but there are actual, technical things, ransomware, et cetera, that exist on social media. So there's both a technical security risk as well as a personal identity security risk when it comes to social media. We want to talk about data collection. So just the idea that these platforms exist for their benefit. Fundamentally, these companies are in the business of gathering data and then exploiting this data in some way or another. Whether that's to advertisers or to think about LinkedIn and all their programs. If you want to get their in-mail and their premium things, so you can send those messages. Basically, those those valuable tools, those subscription-based things that exist on LinkedIn, they only exist and only have value because of the information that regular people who have free accounts, put in. Internal policy and behavior your organization should adopt. So, again, you need to start thinking about what your business's relationship is to social media, and how your staff should work with social media, or what are the rules of engagement? What kind of brand do you want to put out there on people's social media accounts with this stuff? This is a little bit more of an esoteric question and maybe a little bit abstract, but I think you'll get what I'm getting at in a bit. How to make a decision about your level of engagement with these platforms. So there are no right or wrong answers when it comes to some people are like, I hate Facebook, I don't want to be on Facebook, and other people might be on the total opposite of it and say, well, Facebook is essential to my business or what I do, and I couldn't imagine living without it. And both of those perspectives could be 100% correct, or maybe even somewhere in the middle. But you should make a decision about what that level of engagement is and have some rationale behind it. And then, of course, Q&A, which is really important. So anyway, platforms, just a brief review. I mean, Facebook, obviously, everybody knows it's this huge platform. It's I call it, more personal and social. I mean, some of the examples, things that I would come to Facebook for. And it's important to define these things, but you want to talk about your relationship with these platforms. DP Solutions, we have stuff that happens on Facebook, and it wouldn't make sense to use it as much, as we use LinkedIn. We could use maybe for more recruiting and things like that, because that's where people are at looking for jobs. Whereas Facebook, we might want to show off more social things, friend groups, the events we have. There are a lot of other things on Facebook that could be fraught as well, which is things like political discussion, which you'll see on something like Facebook that you probably won't get into as much on other platforms. So just keep that in mind, because you're existing in this space with all this other content. Another important example, obviously, is Twitter. So again, it's all short statements, a platform to share a message. That's really it. It's not, you're going to be, think about what other successful brands do on Twitter, especially weird ones like fast food companies and things like that. They like to make a lot of memes, and all they're trying to do is raise awareness of a brand or an image. They're not trying to talk about, when Arby's or something is putting something on Twitter, they're not trying to discuss all of the ways that they prepare roast beef. They're just trying to show interesting pictures or jokes and things like that. They're not really trying to make some big message. LinkedIn obviously is completely different. You're talking business groups, networking, sales, recruiting, image development, stuff like that. I think LinkedIn's a great platform to do that stuff. If you're trying to be a thought leader or educate people, or maybe find somebody, or look for talent or different perspectives or something like that, LinkedIn can be an excellent place to go for the business community. I do spend some time on there. There's also other things, motivational stuff. I don't know, if that does it for you necessarily, but LinkedIn is a place where you'll see a lot of those sorts of things. And Instagram's an interesting one. And again, we're quite limited here. I could have put TikTok, and you could have put any number of other platforms. MySpace used to be one of these platforms, but we don't talk about that one too much these days. But Instagram is just that the image is the message, right? So you're not, when people are scrolling through Instagram, they just see the picture first. And yeah, you might put a comment below it or something like that, but all you're doing is promoting an image, which can be a little bit fraud. I mean, think about how you could create a fake store or something. I mean, maybe you're a criminal and you wanted to make a little bit of money. So you just pull images of products that you're quote unquote selling. You make a really impressive Instagram page and a web app application type shop behind it. Put a link in your Instagram and make this really professional looking thing that's just a scheme to make a bunch of money. I mean, these things exist. And Instagram is sort of, it's not that Instagram's bad. I mean, people are going to commit fraud on all of these sites. It's just that the format of the message sort of suits that kind of crime. So you should keep that in mind. Some common attacks and threats that exist on these platforms. So the first one that comes to mind is phishing. I mean, everything about this is social and personal. And the bar to entry to get into any of these applications is very low. There, really, you just need an email address and some basic information to create a profile on any of these accounts. And you know, Twitter has verified accounts for celebrities and things like that, so that you know, a politician or a movie star or something like that is a specific profile. But I mean, for the average person, that's never going to happen. It's just when Jill posts something on Facebook and then shares it with me or something like that, I just assume it's Jill because I just have trust, or I create some kind of level of trust so that I know it's Jill who's doing those posts. So it won't surprise you that there's plenty of phishing that's happening on there. What's stopping someone from maybe taking a few of Jill's family pictures, creating an alternate account, calling it Jill Rose, and then maybe scamming people and trying to get them to give this fake person money? I mean, this is something that's highly prevalent on social media. Social engineering sort of goes along the same lines. People are putting so much information out there on social media that this stuff could be used against you. So if you're putting things like birth dates and where you lived, and maybe a picture of your address or your mail. Oh, I just got my college acceptance letter. Here's a picture of it, and my address and my name is all over this stuff. You're sort of volunteering some of this information, and an enterprising person could start using this information to create a profile on you and maybe scam you in the future. So social engineering is definitely something to look out for on social media. That's really not going to come as much surprise, I think. Ransomware and malware. You could absolutely deliver these sorts of technical threats to people via social media. Someone sends a message on Facebook to you. Maybe you've accepted a friend request to them. They're not a legitimate profile. They say, "Oh, check out this. Check out this video I found. Click here to find out more." And you click the link, and it brings you to a malicious website of some kind. That's easily the type of cybercrime that could happen on social media. Permissions. A lot of people put things on social media and don't think about how gated they are. So Facebook has any number of settings, and I'm using Facebook as one example, but they all have their different profiles where you can go in and say, well, these pictures are available for everybody. These are maybe for just my friends. This information is available on my profile for everyone. This is for these specific friends, my top tier friends, or whatever it is. But if you don't set up that stuff right, and then you just start posting, you could easily share information you don't want to share publicly. There's also the further issue, which is that as you give these platforms more information, you're essentially trusting them. And as it pertains to, like, for example, Facebook and Cambridge Analytica, you don't necessarily know what they're going to do with this information that you're trusting them with, which is a data privacy concern. So just be mindful that that these permissions can be a problem. Another potential issue with this too is you set up all these permissions, and then you are clicking the wrong thing or tapping the wrong thing and sharing, and not actually picking your permissions profile that you wanted. So be careful for that. Another thing about social media is there's just tons of scams. People just believe what they want to read. So the sob story about, and obviously there are many legitimate GoFundMe campaigns for people with real problems, but there are also many complete scam campaigns that don't really have any legitimacy. And they say, oh, look, here's poor Steve. He has cancer. He has been getting treatment and he's run out of money. Please commit to his GoFundMe. He's my neighbor. Please commit to his GoFundMe. I mean, there are plenty of scam things that are perpetuated through social media. So really, like anything else, we have to verify the things we click on. And especially before we give people money, we have to know that it is legitimate. And of course, bullying and trolling. This is something that a lot of people are talking about as a big threat, especially for children, but also for adults. I mean, there's plenty of hate groups that exist on these platforms. I don't think the social media platforms have really done a sufficient job in banning and stopping this kind of activity. But it still exists, and it's not fun to be targeted on social media. I mean, you could look at many figures who have posted something that is perhaps controversial, but certainly not something for them to be harassed and hurt emotionally by. But this is something that does occur on social media, so you have to be careful. Data collection we have to talk about. Most of these platforms aren't going to ask you for a credit card or a bank account, but they are going to basically be profiting off of your data. And a lot of this has to do with, for example, advertising and marketing. So, profiles are being created on you based on the things you like, based on the things you post. Maybe through surveys or links that you click on. All of these little pieces of data are being used to create profiles on you, and then have advertisers come and try and market you stuff. And so that's kind of one of the costs of existing on these platforms. Maybe that doesn't bother you, but you should know about it. Data buying and selling. So profiles are being built about you, including what you like or comment or follow. So, this is sort of going beyond just the advertising and marketing. What if I really want to know who Ben Schmerler is, and so that I can maybe influence him politically, or I want to do a background check on him, or some other thing where you're just trying to find out about a person. I mean, this is all information building these profiles, and a lot of it comes through social media. There are regulations protecting your data, but there's really nothing to tell you about some company that just started collecting data on you. You're not going to get a letter in the mail every time some company comes around and starts creating a profile on you. They may report to you if they've had a breach of your social security number, but there are so many companies out there that you probably never heard of that have a profile on you, and it's kind of scary, and there are definitely ethical considerations to be brought up about this sort of thing, but it exists. So another reason why it's probably not a good idea to share things unless you really need to. And then obviously cyber criminals are going to use this stuff as well, just to take information and then try and create to commit phishing attacks. The same way advertisers are maybe trying to convince you to buy a product, someone doing social engineering or phishing or some kind of identity theft is trying to use those same vulnerabilities, those same sort of psychological things to try and commit cybercrime and do other kinds of scams. So it's important then to set some ground rules for engagement on social media for you and your staff in general. So consider separate profiles and accounts for personal items as opposed to work items. So I post tons of stuff on my LinkedIn, but it's pretty much a business account. I don't get too much into my personal life. I might post a fun picture here or there, but I don't really share too much about my political beliefs or what I thought about WandaVision or stuff like that. But the things that I might post just for fun. My LinkedIn is pretty much, I try to have fun with it, but it's pretty much a business account. Whereas my Facebook account, I might be a little bit more open to discussing some things that are a little bit more personal or controversial or things like that. If only because I'm trying to create different images for these sorts of things and separate my threats, if that makes sense. If you have an account representing a company, make sure it's not a person, but it's the company itself that is the entity. So what does that mean? It would be a bad thing if Jill Rose was DP Solutions on Facebook, and she owned everything about the account, and then God forbid something happened or she quit or whatever, and then we no longer have control over our social media. Well, this sort of thing exists out there all the time, where people lose control of their social media because someone just created a page without thinking about actual governance of the social media account. Do not discuss serious business on any social media platform. So honestly, there's no reason why we need to talk about sensitive information via Facebook Messenger or LinkedIn messages or anything like that. This, at the very least, this could be done through email, maybe through a Zoom meeting or through much more secure, private, controlled means. These public social media websites, I just don't think you want to trust them with these kinds of these kinds of sensitive information. Beware, I mentioned this before, beware of fake accounts or engaging just to push up follower numbers. So you probably see that every so often you might get friend requests from people who you've never met before, and sometimes that's fine, right? Like on LinkedIn, if it's somebody who is, a competitor or a related business or someone trying to sell you something, I mean, that's fine. That's what the platform's for. But there are also people who just create these accounts that are really either there just to gather data or to commit cybercrime. Maybe they'll engage with you because they have some fake offering to give you, and maybe they know that some people have this idea that the more followers the better, which is true to some extent. But obviously you want real engagement, not just inflated numbers. So be careful for those fake accounts. It's probably best, if you don't think they're really worth connecting with, to just not connect with them. The more personal and private, the more open you can be with what you post. So maybe I didn't. The more public you are, the riskier your posts become, is really what I should be saying. Maybe I didn't express that correctly. So if I'm sharing information on a Facebook account that's set to public, more people are going to see it, which is both a good and bad thing. So it's good if I'm trying to get my message out. It's bad because more people are going to see who I am, and they might use this against me. It wouldn't shock me at all, with all the things that I post, for people to start spoofing emails that say they're from Ben Schmerler. They could just say they're from Ben Schmerler, be from a completely different account, and do this, and there's really nothing I can do about it. It kind of goes with the territory of posting and sharing a lot of stuff. So just keep that in mind in general. Encourage your staff to have positive interactions with social media. So I don't want to force people go to our website and like everything and comment on everything that we post and things like that. But if your employees had a really positive experience with a customer, or they have hit an anniversary or something like that, or some real milestone, or maybe they experienced a great training, it's really good to post those sorts of things. It does help you from a marketing perspective, as well as encourage just positivity in the office, and actually gives purpose to these social media accounts. It amazes me how many accounts exist out there that don't do things to boost their staff and boost their brand all at the same time. I mean, it's kind of crazy. Make clear on your social media accounts and websites where your official accounts are. So, when you're creating your Facebook account, you should link to your LinkedIn, your Twitter, your Instagram, all that stuff. Vice versa, the same thing goes for the LinkedIn account. You want these profiles to all cross-reference each other, and that way, if somebody is going to create a fake Facebook account, it's not linking back to anything that's legit. All your legitimate accounts are only linking to legit links, and then if you secure those accounts, you can be reasonably sure that people aren't, or not reasonably so much sure that people aren't creating fraudulent accounts, but you can kind of close that loop a little bit better and avoid people falling for those scam accounts that might exist out there. Another quick question is sort of how much should you engage? This is a little more of a philosophical question. It's a very personal choice. So whether we like it or not, there's things that are happening about us on social media, and we all have our own social networks. But we have to ask ourselves, well, what are we actually trying to get out of it? So the first question is really, what are the benefits, right? I don't have social media accounts on every platform. For me, and I imagine most people feel this way, it's just too much. We don't want to manage it all. There's obviously the maybe the mental and emotional impacts of being too much on social media. I don't think anybody should be on it all the time for our own sanity. But we have to think about the benefits of existing on accounts. So I have a somewhat fraught relationship with Facebook personally. There's some things that they do that I don't like. I also find some of the posts and things to be a little obnoxious. However, there are things I get out of Facebook. I do like to connect with people. So ultimately, I've stayed on the platform. I had to make that choice myself. Maybe you feel a little bit differently. But at the end of the day, you shouldn't have an account on these platforms if you don't really see a tangible benefit to your life. It's better to just delete the account. You can always create another account later. How is your brand viewed, and do you even need a brand? So Obviously, at DP Solutions, we do like to promote ourselves through social media. We think it's really good for us. We want to have that kind of approach to branding. But maybe you don't feel that way. Maybe you feel like your audience isn't on social media. You know, let's say you have a clientele, and I don't mean to generalize too much, but maybe your clientele is just not using social media. Maybe they're a little more elderly and they don't use technology as much. They don't like using social media. Well, then just you don't have to do a lot about your social media page. You just want to be mindful of what fraud might exist out there. You have to sort of ask those questions. I don't have that answer for you. It's sort of an internal thing. You want to have a sense of what your identity is online regardless. So is someone pretending to represent you on Facebook? So after you sort of make these decisions about what your engagement level is, you sort of want to have an ongoing discipline to sort of see what's out there on you. You know, Google yourself, look on Facebook and see if people are trying to use your brand or use your image against you. You might not find all of this stuff, but it's a good idea if you do a simple search, you'll find if you're easily found on these platforms in a fraudulent way. So probably worth checking on once in a while. So to wrap up the prepared content, social media is only going to become a more significant part of society, and I know to some people that probably is a big groan, but it's sort of a reality, and I think it's important that we acknowledge that reality. Social media is still relatively new territory and will continue to evolve. So, I remember Facebook starting when I was in college, and obviously it's changed quite a bit since then. Same with MySpace. It was like Facebook and MySpace existed, and MySpace completely went away, and now Facebook is this mega company. But it will continue to evolve, and there's nothing to say that the people who are at the top now will stay at the top. And also the way we engage with it may change. I mean, some of the rules that I said, don't do serious business online on social media. Well, I'm not saying that I think tomorrow that's going to change, but it could change in the near future. I mean, there could be, what if hypothetically a big CRM company decided that they were going to leverage their space in a software as a service CRM to also do some kind of business social media? I think that's totally plausible. So maybe that changes the calculus. So I think it's important, like anything else, that we revisit this and understand sort of where it's at with our lives today. Many businesses have learned to gain significant benefits from social media, but we have to acknowledge the risks and decide how to engage. So these things exist. All technology exists because we get something out of it. I know there's a temptation to say, well, things used to be better before we had the internet, or before, it's for some people will say this, or things used to be better before we had social media. But that's really not true. I mean, you just consider during the pandemic, imagine if the pandemic occurred before social media and technology and communications allowed us to be able to have a video conference with our loved ones, and we couldn't be around, and not only did we have to social distance and separate from them, but we couldn't even see them. We couldn't even have virtual stuff because of this stuff. And so we have to acknowledge these things really do have a benefit to our lives. It's just a question of how we manage them and recognizing that it's not all upside, that there are downsides as well. So anyway, that's it for the prepared content. Looking forward to your Q&A. While Joe gets that together, I'll talk real quick about our April webinar, which is how disaster recovery looks in a post-COVID world. That'll be about a month from now, April 28th. We've been doing a lot of discussion on our website, on LinkedIn, et cetera, and you can check that out, not just for the upcoming webinar, but a lot of our disaster recovery stuff. The conversation about disaster recovery is really changing a lot because so many things have changed. We're using less on-site solutions now. Less of our people are working on-site. Our people are more spread out, decentralized. There are less things while we have a little more safety in some regards, we have big risks in others. So I think we should revisit this and talk about how disaster recovery has completely changed. Another way to look at this, of course, is that a lot of people in their disaster recovery plans did talk about pandemics and public health crises. Well, now that we've gone through this, we should probably consider how we responded to it and how we did respond to an actual disaster, public disaster, and was our plan sufficient to deal with this? And if not, how do we look at this when things finally do feel calm and relatively normal again? So anyway, that's it. Jill, did we get any questions?
Yes, Ben, thank you. All right, our question is, do you think TikTok and WhatsApp are risky due to their connections with the Chinese government?
So it depends on the area of risk. So I don't think that, for example, if you're saying TikTok is less secure because it's Chinese, or therefore when my password is less secure, or the application itself is less secure, it's more subject to ransomware. I don't think that is a real concern, or I don't think it has any base. If there is a difference, I don't think that there's a real difference. The issue with that would be, if a company like TikTok is owned by, a government, or in part by a government, I'm not an expert exactly on the exact ownership structure, but I know in some part they're owned by the government. That means you're giving your information to that government. Now, what can they do with it? I don't know. Is it really going to be used in nefarious ways? Could it even be used in nefarious ways? I'm not sure. Is it a real risk? I mean, as long as you're not engaging with it in a dangerous way, I don't think it is. Having TikTok on your phone doesn't mean that all your credit cards are going to be stolen and your Google Pay is going to be hacked and stuff like that. But it does mean that the information you volunteer to them is now theirs. And the same thing applies to any other social media company, right? So I'm talking about TikTok or WhatsApp now, but we have to ask that question about Facebook too. When we give Facebook information, what are they doing with it, and how can it be used to our benefit and to our detriment? So I would look at it that way. I don't use TikTok, but honestly, it's not because of the any concerns about China or the government. It's because I don't want to use it. I just don't care. So that's just me. Any other questions?
Yep, great. Yep, we have another one. Does being verified on Twitter or other apps make it safer to share information?
No. So what being verified on Twitter does is it means that the quote unquote owner of the account is who they say they are. So I'm trying to think of a good example of someone verified on Twitter. If Mike Trout or somebody, a baseball player, I don't even know if he's on Twitter, or LeBron James, someone I know is actually on Twitter. LeBron James is verified on Twitter. We know that account is quote unquote owned by LeBron James. It doesn't necessarily mean that he's in control of that account at the time. Someone could hack his account and start posting LeBron stuff. Maybe they start hating on LeBron. But we know that he owns it. It doesn't mean, though, that the information we transmit through that account is any more secure, or that the hosting company is any more secure or anything. It's simply saying that account is verified as who they say they are in terms of ownership. So it's not that helpful. And the truth is that for most people who on these accounts or on these social media things, you're probably not going to have a verified account unless you go through some weird background check thing, because you're just not big and important enough to get that kind of scrutiny. So sadly, no, it's not really any more secure.
Okay, gotcha. All right, yeah, we did have one more question come in. Why is it a bad idea to do the quizzes and things like that on Facebook?
It's a terrible idea to do the quizzes and things on Facebook, because those quizzes are basically security questions. So, tell us your favorite color. Tell us the name of your first car. What was the name of your first cat? Oh my God, I can't believe all these things. Oh, that was also the name of my cat. All these sorts of things. That's great, but these are also security questions for identity thieves, or people to gather this information for social engineering to try and fool you and think that they actually do know you. And when you're answering these questionnaires and these quizzes, it's probably going to a Facebook database somewhere. It's certainly going to whoever wrote that application, that Facebook app, if you will. that gets this information, and who knows what they're doing with it. Maybe they're selling it for advertising, but maybe they're using it to sell it on the dark web. I mean, who knows? So don't do it ever. Pretty much, there's no point. It's also, in my humble opinion, it's a big waste of time. So, but it's definitely not smart, and we shouldn't do it. And to be honest, I don't know why Facebook doesn't, and on these other sites, don't just ban it. I guess maybe because people have fun with it, and maybe there are legitimate, business uses for it, but it's bad. We shouldn't do it. So just, I guess I should say that's my 2 cents. I think I gave a little more than 2 cents on that, more like maybe 25 cents on it.
I don't see any other questions coming through if you want to wrap up.
Great. So thanks everybody for joining us today. Really appreciate it. Hope you found this information helpful. You have my contact information below, both email and LinkedIn. If you want to reach out to me, please join us for our next webinar. Yeah, we got a lot of other content on the website too, videos, blogs, etc. So if you find this information helpful, maybe you'll find some of that information helpful too. Have a great day and stay safe out there. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.